My task is to just introduce the chair, the rightful person who is going to take over. Our very dear friend and friend to the Confucius Institute, Professor Esther Akilabi. She is a full professor and currently serves as a vice dean for teaching and learning in the Faculty of Engineering and Built Environment of the University of Johannesburg. Her research interest is in the field of modern and advanced manufacturing processes, namely distinction steel welding and additive manufacturing. Her research in the field of laser-based additive manufacturing includes laser material processing and surface engineering. Professor has written quite extensively. I won't go through the entire half a page biography. She's a well-known professor in the University of Johannesburg, and it's given me a great pleasure. Join me to welcome her on stage.
Thank you, Dr. Moyai. Good evening. I'll start with the students before I go to the VIPs. Good evening to the students, and thank you for joining us this evening. I'm really excited to see the big numbers that you really want to come out here this evening to engage with what our two speakers have to say. And to the members of staff of UJ that are here with us this evening, I want to say thank you. Welcome to this event. And a special welcome to Mr. Eso Pahad, former minister in the presidency. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us this evening. And on that note, I want to say all protocols duly observed. I would like to invite to the podium our two speakers this evening. I'll start with our speaker, Dr. Zhu Ming. I practiced that name in advance, and he told me I was correct. Thank you. Please come to the stage, Dr. Zhu Ming. Please, a round of applause for him. Thank you. And the respondent for this evening dialogue is Professor Arthur Mutambara. Thank you. Thank you. I would like to start by thanking the co-director of the Confucius Institute, Dr. David Moyani, for inviting me to chair this dialogue. And also thanks to your co-director, Professor Pan, who is currently in China. Perhaps you were wondering when you received the invitation and the poster regarding this particular seminar this evening. When he spoke to me about it as well, it got me thinking, okay, Fourth Industrial Revolution, Satellite Corporation, the next frontier of Sino-Africa relations. Perhaps you also, like me as well, a few weeks ago, wondering, what is this all about now? Fourth Industrial Revolution, China, Africa relations, and all of that. So, this seminar this evening, it takes its backdrop from the UJ seeking to lead with respect to the Fourth Industrial Revolution with our new Vice Chancellor, Prof. Chilisi Marwala, even before his inauguration and at his inauguration, and further after that as well. We've been having many engagements, dialogue, seminar, workshops, and all that you can think about regarding the Fourth Industrial Revolution here in UJ. And this seminar that we are holding today seek to understand the roles that technologies have to play regarding the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And it cuts across various disciplines, you will agree with me, in agriculture, communications, and in infrastructure as well. And this seminar is informed by the ethos of Industry 4.0, in that it is multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary. Dr. Chu, as we met downstairs and we're having a chat, and also on the table here in front, I recall Prof. Okunta taking him on and asking him, your PhD in African history, wow, from China. So when he was posed with that question, I said, you must be bold and brave from China to say you want to have a PhD in African history. He did that successfully, and he got his PhD in that field. So thank you very much for joining us this evening and agreeing to be the speaker for this evening. And we have Prof. Mutambara. I was also telling Prof. Mutambara that we need to have an office for him very soon at FEBE. And earlier on, you know why I said that? It's about the third or the fourth time that we're hosting Prof. Mutambara in the last 2 months in UJ. Thank you very much for always agreeing to join us here in UJ. And this evening will be the second time that I'm privileged and honored to read your biography. So you agree with me that it's okay that my next door in the office should be the office of Prof. Mutambara. So we'll try and make that happen. He's got his PhD in robotics and mechatronics and an MS in computer engineering, and comes with a wealth of experience from government, from policy involvement. He's been at NASA. I will reserve and read his biography at a later stage. The fourth industrial revolution, for it to work, you will all agree with me that it calls for input from all disciplines, from humanities to engineering to science, education, all faculties and the College of Business and Economics. For us here in UJ, we believe that it is a collective responsibility for us to make this technology to work, the fourth industrial revolution. And I was also in a meeting recently, a week or 2 weeks ago, wherein we have researchers across UJ, across various faculties, speaking about this fourth industrial revolution and what it got to offer us. And while some were saying, oh, great, a good thing, we have to champion this and make it work, on the other side, I had colleagues who were saying, well, have you guys thought about it that people are going to lose jobs? A lot of mixed feelings, a lot of people thinking through and wondering, where is this going to take us to? Well, at that particular meeting, I gave a bombshell by saying that we are in this room today, we're talking about the fourth industrial revolution. I hosted a Japan professor a month ago, less than a month ago, and he said, the whole world is still talking about fourth industrial revolution, but in Japan, they are already looking at society 5.0. And yet, when I checked the unemployment rate in Japan, it sits at 3.3%. So if Japan have dealt with Industry 4.0 and they are moving on to Society 5.0, yet their unemployment rate is very, very low. Why can't we in South Africa? Why can't we in Africa? So that is food for thought for each and every one of us. The fourth industrial revolution, you will agree with me, will require cooperation across countries and across continents as well. And that is why this topic this evening is centered around the cooperation between China and African countries in satellite cooperation. I've been to China, and it's a nice place to be, and I would love to go back there again. You will agree with me, if you've been to China before, you will agree with me that Africa as a continent, we have a lot to learn from China. And on that note, with that brief introduction, I hope I've been able to successfully whet your appetite of what we have ahead of us this evening. We will have a speaker, Dr. Zhu, speak for 30 minutes, and then we will have Prof. Mutambara respond in 20 minutes. During the proceeding this evening, dinner will be served, so please don't go away. Stay with us throughout the event. And we will then open for question and answer to close up. On that note, I will now read the bio of our speaker. Dr. Zhu Ming is a research fellow at the Center for West Asian and African Studies of Shanghai Institute for International Studies. His research interests include Sino-African relations in areas such as economic cooperation, people-to-people exchanges, and high-tech cooperation. The UN 2030 Agenda, the SDGs, as well as BRICS. Dr. Zhu has a PhD in African history from the History Department of the Shanghai Normal University. He earned his MA in International Relations from the SIIS and his BA in Geography, Information Systems from the East China Normal University, also in Shanghai. He has previously served as a visiting scholar at the Center for Chinese Studies of Stellenbosch University here in South Africa and Southern African Research and Documentation Center in Zimbabwe. Over the years, Dr. Chu's research has been funded by the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Chinese Ministry of Commerce, the government of Germany, as well as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. On this note, please join me to welcome Dr. Chu. Thank you.
Could my speech be a heavyweight one? I'm not very sure, but I just try to do my best to share my new ideas with you. And let me just explain a bit why I choose this topic. In fact, I believe everyone here, you have heard more or less about China-Africa relations, for example, from the infrastructure perspectives, from the FDI perspectives, from the Chinese living or working here. But as a scholar, expert on China-Africa relations, sometimes I feel a bit hard to find new topics, because sometimes I think if I repeat some old topics, it's meaningless. It's very hard to attract many audience like you, because I found that now the hall is almost full. Just 2 years ago, I was invited to attend one topic about China's satellite promotion policy in the world, because my academic background is Africa, so I'm in charge of doing some research about how China could promote its satellite cooperation in Africa. Since that, I have been interested in this topic, because we might do more research on this topic. I think the more potential both China and Africa we could work to produce. And I would deliver my speech in 4 parts. First, I would introduce a bit about how about Africa, the whole continent's satellite industry. And the second part, I would introduce from a Chinese scholar's perspective about how about China's satellite industries. After we knowing some background information, we could jump to the third part, that is how China and Africa, both sides, could promote our satellite cooperation. But I think during the process of the partnership or the Ubuntu relations in your South African world, I think there have and would still be a lot of challenges, difficulties. That would be my final part, that is how we could do better. Now let's go to the first part. And this map is a bit old one, but because I'm not able to update it, but I think it could be served as a good reference map. The map was made by one South African scholar by around 8 years. It is the global satellite industry map. We could see that from the red color region, the yellow color region, and also the dark color region countries means that such kind of 4 kinds of countries, they have some kinds of satellite projects or even satellite. But the gray countries means that don't have any satellite or any satellite service. We could see that the most gray countries lies in Africa continent, where we could also see some power countries in the world like America, China, Russia. So I think that just 9 years ago, in the whole Africa continent, there are only 4 countries have some kind of satellite capabilities. I call it so-called the big 4. Not the big 5 as animals. That's the big 4 satellite powers in Africa continent. And besides the big 4s, the other Africa continent, I call it satellite deficit, because they don't have any capabilities of satellite. And so what's the meaning of satellite? I just you use your minister's words. Almost 11 years ago, then Science and Technology Minister, His Excellency, I don't want to repeat to say it, but he mentioned that Earth observation is no longer just a way to satisfy our curiosity, but has become crucial in ensuring the survival of human beings. How we could do the Earth observation? That should be from the outer space by the help of a satellite. And your new Minister of Science and Technology, Madame Pandor, also delivered some speech to persuade the South Africans to develop your own satellite industry. He said that South Africa has just been a consumer and a net importer of space technologies. South Africa should transform its roles, not just a net importer, but maybe exporter in the future. And we could just skip it. It is one recent research about what's the relation between satellite technology and the UN 2030 agenda, that in short, that is SDGs. We could see that if we could take a full good use of satellite technologies, we could promote the humans' welfare, because the SDGs covers almost every dimension of the human needs. And as for the Chinese divisions, we could divide the satellite into 4 big groups. First group is the EO satellite. The second group is the communication satellite. I have seen so many DSTV service in South Africa. That is the communication satellite. The third part is the navigation satellite, provide the people navigation service. The last one is a bit fewer group, that is the high technology ones. Because due to my limited time, so I only would like to introduce you about the navigation satellite. And as for the navigation satellite, it could provide now has a connection with everybody here. Why? Because I believe that everybody here, you have some cell phones, smartphones, you use your apps. When you drive a car, you will, in the near future, the Africans' consumption of the satellite service, only in terms of the location-based service, will double and double to 4 times bigger than today's levels. And let me jump to the second part about China's satellite industry. I think maybe most of you know when the world began to have its first satellite. It started in the year of 1957, when then Soviet Union launched its first satellite into space. Just 1 year after Soviet Union's success, in the year of 1958, China secretly began its satellite research project. And after exactly around 12 years, very hard efforts, and China has launched its first satellite in the year of 1970. And its name is very interesting. In Chinese, it's called 东方红1号卫星. In English, it could be translated as the East is red, because at that time China Mao was still alive, and China Mao is described as the sun in the sky. So the East is red satellite is in honor of China Mao, because China Mao is the sun in the East. And during the China Mao era, the Chinese has made some bigger progress in the terms of science and technology. Satellite is put as one of the top programs, just like many Chinese know the name as in Chinese called 两弹一星. In English means 2 bones and 1 satellite. The bones means the nuclear bones. And the China's progress of satellite and plus its nuclear bones has become a very important source of Chinese pride and confidence in its systems. Just like the Mr. Deng Xiaoping, who is the successor of Chairman Mao. He once said that if it were not for the atomic bombs, the hydrogen bomb, and the satellite that we put into orbit in the 1960s, China would not have its international standing as it enjoys today. Even in recent years, we will always celebrate the success of our nuclear weapons and the satellite. It has become a continuing source for China's confidence in our systems already. Yeah, and I think just almost just 6 years ago, China has, as for the number of satellites, China has made one historical progress. Why? Because since the year Soviet Union has launched the human's first satellite, there are only two superpowers in the world, Soviet Union and America. They have the most satellite as for numbers, but just in the year of 2012 July, China, the number of satellites China has already ahead of the number of Russia. China has already around more than 120 satellites, while Russia has the number is 110, so 10 less than China. So as for the numbers, China has become the second superpower in the world. That is the first time in history. And until the last year, the number of Chinese satellites has jumped from as high as 170. So the number is still growing. Yes. And besides numbers, how about the incomes? In fact, the income of Chinese satellite has become a very booming, fast-growing industries. We could see, I just provided you the graphic here. You could see the curve. The curve is rising very fast in a sharp curve. And just 2 years ago, only as for if we exchange the Chinese satellite income into US dollars, so China satellite industries, the industry size is already as large as 33 billion US dollars. I think the size is quite big and it's not hard to reach. And this is a graphic of the powers incomes. You could see that besides the superpowers or superpower blocks like USA, Japan, European Union, China has taken around 11% of the global income. I think as a developing country, it's not very easy to do that. And besides the income, we could look at some academic ones. That is, how about R&D? I mean, the academic studies. The graphic I took from the OECD report. It outlines the global countries' research about space science. Space science has a very close relation to the satellite industry. We could see that the number 1 is still USA, but the number 2 is already China. And China and both USA and China has played the leading roles in the research on the space science. And because the graphic is not big enough, but South Africa is also among the top powers. But because there are so many countries, I think maybe you could not find South Africa. Yes. And let me jump to the third part. That is, how about our ongoing cooperations in the field of satellite cooperations. I outlined the 3 key approaches of China's cooperation with Africa. The first approach is bilateral ways. For example, almost 10 years ago, China has signed its commercial compact with Nigeria to make satellite for Nigeria and also in charge of the launch. And up to now, we have cooperated with Nigeria about I think 3 or 4 satellites, and 1 failed. The other are successful. And besides the commercial cooperations, China has also signed some space cooperation agreements and signed a partnership with some African countries like Algeria and Egypt. And besides the bilateral cooperations, we also had a bilateral cooperation, including FOCA, Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, and also the CASCF. CACF is, I think many people don't know this form because this form is related to the Arabic countries, but because you have the North Africans, and including Egypt and Algeria, so I think I needed to add this CASCF because this firm is also in charge of the China's satellite cooperation with the Middle East countries, including Egypt and Algeria. And the third one is the Belt and Road Initiative. And besides the bilateral, we also have some group approach that is within the BRICS approach. I will introduce you that. And let me share you how the progress we have made within the FOCA, because the FOCA is the key cooperation platform between China and Africa. I have found all the related documents and I read them very carefully. I think such kind of mechanism cooperation within the FOCA framework, it could be traced back to as early as the year of 2009, because in this year we have launched the China-Africa Science and Technology Partnership platform plan. And within this partnership, I think Africa has been China's quite good partner. I mean that such kind of partnership is not only China providing help or to Africa. Africa also provide help to Beijing. For example, China has established its satellite ground station in 2 African countries. One is in Kenya and the other is in Namibia. Because the world is not flat, the world is round. When Chinese satellite passed the African continent, we needed the local satellite station to provide some signal support. But our support from Namibia and Kenya to help our China spaceship and satellite. Such kind of help is quite essential, and I think many Chinese are grateful to this help from Africa. And let's go back to the FOCA. And when the FOCA goes to the year, in the year of 2009, we have pushed our new action plan. Within the action plan, both sides have written very clearly about how we could push our satellite cooperation as within the FOCA framework. That is, we will use the data resources from the CBERS. CBERS is the short name of China Brazil Earth Resource Satellite. Okay, that is CBERS. I wonder anyone from the Portuguese speaking African countries, because I also put its Portuguese name of CBERS here. So such kind of CBERS program is a joint program between China and Brazil. It has been last for more than 20 years, and after around 20 years successful partnership, China and Brazil think that we could share the satellite service with Africa continent. And just in the year of 2009, we have South Africa government has received the CBERS signals. That is the beginning of the CBERS satellite cooperation located in South Africa. And up to now, such kind of cooperation is quite good. When I read the newest report from your SANASA, SA, it says that because such kind of satellite data provision is totally free, so through you using the data freely, the SANASA could save millions of rand every year. And by using the CBERS satellite data, the satellite could provide some Earth observation along the SADC countries. That is as many as 13 countries, and the square could be as large as more than 20 million square kilograms. And also, besides within the BRICS, I believe everybody knows BRICS because South Africa is the S of BRICS. Also within the BRICS, we have also pushed some satellite cooperation. For example, just 3 years ago, in the UFA summit, In the UFA declarations, it states that we will promote we will intensify our cooperation in the areas of space technologies, satellite navigation, including GLONASS and Beidou. GLONASS is Soviet Union's space systems, and Beidou is China's version. And in recent years, the BRIC countries, including your countries, has joined together, wants to promote our joint programs, that is the BRICS remote sensing satellite constellations. And such kind of working conference has been held for at least twice. I think I'm happy to see that up to now, this kind of BRICS satellite program is carrying quite good. And also, if we look at the official document of China's space policy, that is a white paper on China's space activities. It was released in the year of 2016. It has outlined two main external cooperation projects. One is Belt and Road Space Information Corridor. The second one is, I have mentioned that it is a BRICS cooperations. And let me just compare something. That is, what's the uniqueness of satellite corporations? Because I believe that many of you are very familiar with one word, that is industrial capacity cooperation. I think that compared to the traditional industrial capacity cooperation, the satellite industry cooperation is quite uniqueness. For example, even in China, the satellite is quite a sunrise industry. That's to say that it enjoys quite a large potentials. It is like steel industries, textile industry in China. It has become an overcapacity. So I think that if China could promote the cooperation, that is a potential industry with Africa, both could enjoy the much bigger potentials. And secondly, because we know that if you want to build a factory, you need a large size of land, lot of electricity, lot of waters. Maybe you will produce a lot of polluted airs, waters. But compared to such kind of older industries, satellite industry is relatively clean, and its main cooperation areas, outer space, it will occupy very little land. We could save a lot of resources on the ground. And thirdly, the traditional industries will need a large amount of the cheap labors, or in other words, blue-collar works. But because the satellite industries is a high technology industries, it will need smarter labors, and many local peoples could get much higher salaries, incomes. And lastly, I think the traditional industries is mainly based on the consumption of the natural resources, like the iron, gas, petrols. But the satellite industries, it is one kind of the R&D intensive industries. It will not consume so much resources. It will only need a smart mind together. And so let me jump to the final conclusion. That is how we could do better. And it is old Chinese proverb that if you want to talk something, you need better to check yourself. So I always began with criticizing China itself. And I think even I have outlined so many advantages, progress of China, but I think China still has its disadvantages. Why? Because China is a latecomer. And while China is developing its satellite industry, as I said, in the China Mao era, China is facing the sanctions both from the Moscow and from the Washington. So China's path of the satellite industry is quite hard and rocky. So it has still face some technology embargoes from America today. So we, in some we are not so powerful in every sector of these industries. We still have our bottleneck. For example, I have outlined 3 challenges. One challenge is related to your country. The first challenge is about many Africans, including South Africans, you don't have not good enough perception of China's space capacity. Why? I believe that before I deliver this speech, many of you will not know how about China satellite and how about the progress between China and Africa. We could see the graphic here. This public opinion poll was done by the Chinese Foreign Language Bureau. The question is about how do you see China's science progress? Could you see the South Africa here? South Africa is, yes, you could see that. You could see that as for the only around 25 South Africans, very low level, you are familiar with the China's science progress. But compared with South Africa, India, around almost half of Indians, they are familiar with China's science progress. And as for the Brazil, almost close to 5. I think so maybe China and South Africa, we are so far isolated, and our former diplomatic relations is relatively short, because this year we will celebrate our 20-year anniversary of former diplomatic relations. So I think a lot of reasons has made many Africans, even South Africans, because you are the most educated, most well-informed Africans in African continent. You know very little about China's satellite corporations. And I think the second challenge is I have said that because China is still facing the embargoes, technology embargoes from the European Union, Japan, and America, it makes that China's satellite capacity in terms of companies is not powerful enough, especially many Chinese satellite companies are state-owned companies. We don't have the your proud African Tesla company's founder, Musk. You could see the photo here. This is the graphic shows that in every sector of the satellite industries at a global level, downstream industries, how about the global powers positions? We could say that as for the top 10 biggest, most powerful companies, China has its share, but the share is not big enough. The most powerful satellite companies, either from America, either from European Union, either from Japan or South Korea. China is trying to catch up, but I think we still need time and resources. And the last challenge is that related to the time. That is to say that China's satellite system is not a global one yet. It will be a global one in the future. You could see the graphic, this one. Because compared with China, the US is the leading power because everybody knows the word GPS. GPS is the American systems. Now the GPS is already equal to the global positioning systems. We could see that these are the global powers satellite systems. America, as for the cover of the global sphere, America is the number 1, and the European Union, Russia, and China. China up to now, we need some time to be as at least as advanced as the other powers, but I think it really do cost time. And so what could we do? I think firstly we need strategies firstly, or in your South African word, Ubuntu. That is to say that link up with different strategies. For example, in Africa, you have the AU 2063 agenda. I have read the document. I found that some chapter is also related to the satellite industry and the high technologies, and also the SDGs. And bilaterally, we should take a full good use of our de facto mechanisms, like some mechanism I have outlined here, that is forecast, better road, and centuries. And I could also share with you this graphic. This graphic is about how about the progress of high technology exports. We could see that almost 20 years ago, China and South Africa, we the percent of high technology exports, the level is almost the same. That is 5%. But after almost 20 years, China has jumped to 25%, and South Africa, I think it is still not the progress is not so ideal. So I think we could do quite a lot to promote such kind of potential industrials to bring this hope. And lastly, I think we need more pensions, we need more private companies involved, and we also need more education, because without smarter labor, as I have mentioned, without talents in these space science areas, no industry, no science, no satellite industry will develop. And that's the end. Many thanks, and sharp sharp.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chu. That was really sharp. Thank you very much for your thought-provoking seminar that you have presented. Highly appreciated. Prof. Mutambara will be responding, so therefore I will not do his job. The only thing I want to say is that I like the adage in one of your slides, which I've written down here. You said, the taller you stand, the further you will see. Chinese old saying. So I'm taking that away from your talk. Thank you. On that note, while you enjoy the dinner, I will introduce our respondent for this evening talk, and that is Prof. Arthur Mutambara. Prof. Mutambara is the former Deputy Prime Minister of Zimbabwe. He is the author of a new trilogy, In Search of the Elusive Zimbabwean Dream, an autobiography of thought leadership. He was one of the three principals who created and led the government of national unity. The other two were Prime Minister Shanghai and President Robert Mugabe. As the DPM, his key functions included assisting the Prime Minister in policy formulation and supervision of policy implementation. He worked on three national efforts: the Shared National Vision, Rebranding Zimbabwe, and a National Infrastructure Master Plan. Professor Mutambara is currently a visiting full professor with the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment at the University of Johannesburg. He is also an independent technology and strategy consultant based here in South Africa. He was recently the president of the African News Agency. His primary mandate included media technology innovation, digital platform development, and harnessing social media tools. He was driving the use of artificial intelligence and the deployment of intelligent algorithms in media, resulting in the development of new business models. Professor Mutambara is a chartered engineer, a fellow of the Institute of Engineering and Technology. He is a professional engineer, a fellow of the Zimbabwe Institute of Engineers, a fellow of the Zimbabwe Academy of Sciences, and a senior member of the IEEE. He was a research scientist at NASA, a visiting professor at MIT, a professor at FAMU, FSU, and a management consultant with McKinsey and Company. He has written 2 electrical engineering books. Professor Mutambara holds a PhD in robotics and mechatronics and an MSc in computer engineering, both from the University of Oxford in USA, where he was a Rhodes Scholar. He graduated with a BSc honors in electrical engineering from the University of Zimbabwe. In 2007, Professor Mutambara was accorded the World Economic Forum Young Global Leader status, and subsequently, he attended the World Economic Forum events from 2007 to 2013 in Davos, China, India, and Africa. The bio continues, even though we said a very short one, but I just had to keep it short. On that note, please join me to welcome Professor Mutambara.
Thank you very much for that propaganda. Propaganda spreading over my name. Now, all I have to do is to respond to that excellent presentation we've had today. And I want to thank you, Dr. Ming, for that presentation. The summary of the response is to say, Africans must not be reacting. We must be proactive. With respect to China, with respect to Europe, with respect to the Americans, we must be proactive. So what we want is a proactive African approach to the space agenda. So that when we engage with China, when we engage with the US, when we engage with the Europeans, we have a sense of what we want. And they respond to what we want, as opposed to us fitting into their little strategies. That's the summarized version of my response. The African must be proactive. The African must plan. The starting point with us as Africans is to say, do we really appreciate the importance of space? Why space? And then we assess our efforts so far. What have we done? What has been done at the AU? What's been done in SADC? What's been done in South Africa? Then we make a few remarks and comments on the China-Africa current activities. Then we move on to our major response to say what we want. What is our idea of a space program as Africans? What we want as Africans? And then we structure a way forward. That's our discussion. That is the nature of our response today. Now, we need a lot of education, and Dr. Ming has already alluded to this. As Africans, we must understand that when we say space, when we say satellite, it has major applications to economic development, to addressing our socio-economic needs. There's potential impact to our governance. There's ways and means to improve our socio-economic conditions by leveraging satellite technology. There's impact in agriculture, the environment, mining, telecoms, broadcasting, education, commerce, and industrialization in general. Let us have a sense of understanding that the space agenda is in our collective African interests. Let us have a sense of understanding that we can improve the quality of our life by leveraging space. That is the starting point. And we can make sure we can have pursue what is called data democracy. Data democracy says, let's have equal access to information. With space, with satellite technology, we'll be able to have what we call equitable access to data, equitable use of data, and equitable benefits. information about the weather, about climate, about terrain, about the environment, geotechnical, and mineralization. This is one very important area. You see, the problem is Africans, we're very rich in terms of natural resources, but we don't know where the minerals are, and we don't know the concentration of the minerals, and more importantly, we don't know how much is there. There's no sense of quantification of the asset underground. So we are selling our souls for a song. We're selling our minerals for cheap because we don't know what we have. If we use satellite technology, we'll be able to know how much in terms of diamonds, gold, platinum we have in South Africa, in Botswana, in Malawi, in Nigeria, and be able to negotiate better deals by using information, location, and concentration of natural resources. We can get that information from satellite technology. Quantification of the unmined asset. Before you give Anglo the claim, in South Africa, know the quantity of gold that is down underground. Before you give a claim to a private player on diamonds or platinum, as a government, have a sense of the quantity of the asset. We can do that using satellite technology. There are so many applications that we have for satellite technology, so we must understand that. In terms of wireless technologies, you see, when you go wireless, it is 10 times faster. It is 50% cheaper than landline networks. So satellite communication is more effective, it's more productive, and yet it is cheaper. So as Africans, we can benefit from that application of satellite technologies. We can use satellite in education, long-distance learning, surveillance, monitoring of illegal shipping, oil spills, environmental damage. Africans can participate in the construction of information infrastructure. He indicated it before. We must not only be consumers of information, we must be producers of information. We are sick and tired of being sick and tired of being consumers of knowledge. We want to be participants in the construction of knowledge, creators of knowledge, knowledge management, knowledge creation, and knowledge ownership. So as Africans, we want to be the creators of the knowledge about space. We want to design the satellite. We want to construct the satellite. That's what we're talking about in terms of our participation in the global information infrastructure. Okay? Of course, satellite, DSTV, Kwese, all that are possible applications we can use. Remote delivery of healthcare, and also using drones to deliver medicines. All those are possibilities we must understand as Africans. Now, you always worry, no, but maybe why don't we as Africans concentrate on HIV and AIDS? Why don't we concentrate on second generation technologies? Why don't we leave artificial intelligence and space to America, Japan, and China? We're too backward to benefit from high technology. I've got news for you. Sometimes our poverty, sometimes our lack of development, sometimes our lack of infrastructure is actually an opportunity to adopt high technologies. Better than China, better than Japan, better than America. Why? Because sometimes our lack of infrastructure makes it easier to adopt newer technologies, makes it cheaper to adopt newer technologies, more effective. So don't shy away from cloud computing, from quantum computing, from blockchain technologies, from nanotechnology. Don't shy away from satellite technologies. If you are clever, if you are creative, maybe it will be cheaper. Maybe it will be simpler to apply these things in Mpumalanga, in Cholocho, in Kumasi, in Dotito, than in New York. Think about the wireless technology, mobile banking. Where is global bank practice? Where is the best in terms of mobile banking? It's not China, it's not Japan, it's not America, it's Kenya, Mupesa. It's Zimbabwe EcoCash. There's nothing in America, there's nothing in Europe that is as good as EcoCash as a platform. There's nothing in America, nothing in Japan that is as effective as M-Pesa. Why? Because in Zimbabwe, we don't have enough brick and mortar banks. Because in Kenya, we don't have enough brick and mortar banks. Why would you bank on a phone when the bank is downstairs from your house? Why would you bank on a phone when the bank is next door? So out of necessity, because of our poverty, because of lack of infrastructure, we are the best in the world. M-Pesa, EcoCash, superstars because of poverty. I say this to say, don't shy away from high science. Don't shy away from satellite technologies, from the elements of the fourth industrial revolution. Maybe, just maybe, blockchain technologies, nanotechnologies, 3D computing, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, human augmentation, all these interesting technologies might be easier, cheaper, and more effective in poor Africa because of our poor infrastructure and our lack of development. Infrastructure sunk costs are there in Japan. Because they've invested in wires, they've got all the technologies, we can leapfrog, we can jump. So that's what you must always remember as Africans, that we might actually be the place to adopt space science better than America, better than Europe. Okay? We want to see the transfer of technology from China to Africa. We want technology transfer. We want to share scientific and technological knowledge. We want to promote data democracy. We want to make sure we are working together with our colleagues. Remember, China was as poor as we are. They were able to move 400 million people out of poverty over 30 years. There are lessons for Africans. They are now the #2 economy in the world, from poverty to stardom. So maybe we can get there too. But we must understand how we can leverage and work with them, as has been explained. We must understand our efforts. The AU is working on a space program, which was adopted on the 31st of January 2016. Okay, but we're spending not enough in terms of our activities as Africans. Okay, you can see the numbers for Nigeria and so on. Okay, what we want immediately, satellite cooperation training, data sharing, technology demonstration, and solutions for African countries. And we want examples of how we can do it together with our colleagues from China. Okay? However, the starting point, Dr. Ming, before we talk to you, before we engage you, we must be clear about what we want ourselves. Before we engage Europe, before we engage the Americans, let us be clear about what we want as Africans. That's my major input today. What is it that we want about space? What is our agenda? We must be proactive as Africans. We should be having our own strategies, our own plans, and the Chinese must be responding to the African strategy. The Americans must be responding to the African strategy. The Europeans must be responding to the African agenda, not the other way around. That is the message we're pushing today. What do we want? Here's the message to America. Here's the message to China. We want a well-coordinated and integrated Africa space program. We don't want any bilateral deals, Dr. Ming. Little South Africa, and I'll show you how you are little. We don't want bilateral deals between South Africa and China. South Africa is too small. No bilateral deals between China and Nigeria. Nigeria is too small. No to bilateral deals between Algeria and China. No, no, no. What we want is an AU approach to global partners. Let us approach you, China, as Africa. Approach you, America, as Africa. Approach you, Europe, as the African Union. That way, we can have economies of scale. That way, we can have an impact. That way, we don't get shortchanged. You get shortchanged if you go as little Botswana, little Zimbabwe, little South Africa. Shame on you, South Africa. You must go as Africa. You're not a brick. You don't qualify to be a brick. Sorry, my brothers. You are too small to be a brick. You must go as the African Union. Then you are a brick compared to Brazil, Russia, India, and China. As the African Union, then you can be a brick. Lead to South Africa, my favorite country. Emphasis must be on continental scale and impact. Economic impact, economies of scale. We must make sure our program is responsive to our social needs, our economic needs, our political and environmental needs. We define our needs as Africans. A needs-driven, responsible, peaceful. We don't want wars. Africans don't fight. We're not supposed to fight. Sometimes we do fight, but we don't want wars. We don't want a war-based space program. Ours should be about peace and development. A sustainable, globally competitive program. We want to compete with you, China. When we get our act together, we must compete with China. We must have a global ranking. South Africa must not seek a global ranking in South Africa. We must get a global ranking as the AU. And I'll show you that with that, we can actually be a proper player. And then, of course, we need a unified regulatory framework for the program. This is what we want as Africans. When we approach China, approach America, approach Europe, we present ideas such as these ones, setting out what we want. A pursuit for an indigenous space capability, a consolidated integrated African position, an indigenous African space program. And the policy objectives and principles will be the core building blocks of such a program. Okay. What is the way forward for the African? Let us be clear about the vision for that program. Then the policy framework of that program. Then, of course, the game plan, the strategy to achieving that vision. Then we emphasize continental integration, both economic and political. And remember, by the way, I've said it before, Minister, the problem we have is we want to be a president. 54 presidents. Why do we need 54 men and women to be president of a small place like Africa? They have one president, they're doing fine. Xi Jinping is doing fine. Donald Trump is doing fine. I hope so. We have 54 of these men. I'm a president of starving people. We want continental integration where there's one president in Africa. Ramaphosa will be Minister of Defense. Mnangagwa will be Minister of Local Government. Kagame will be Minister of Police. Are these African leaders ready? They're not serious. They pay lip service to continental integration. All I'm saying to you as Africans is that there's no such thing as a free lunch. If you're going to have a United States of Africa, we must give up on some elements of national sovereignty. Give up on your aspirations to be a president and have one in Africa, the rest to be ministers and chiefs. Then we must work on a framework of partnerships. When we engage with China, let's not just go there without an idea. Go to America, go to China with an idea of what you want from the arrangement. A framework for global partnerships. And also achieve Pan-African buy-in and ownership. The Africans on the continent must be on board. The Africans on the diaspora, in the Caribbeans, African Americans, and so on. Good old Pan-Africanism will help us in space. There are some African Americans who are in space. The continental integration agenda must involve the African diaspora. Then, of course, when we've done that, we come up with an implementation plan and then an implementation matrix. Then we have an inclusive management and governance structure. Then, more importantly, what is measured gets done. Monitoring, performance measurement, evaluation, and feedback. That's the framework of what the Africans must do before they engage the other players. Okay? We have a space program vision. We have a strategy to achieving that vision. Then execution, execution, execution. Sequencing, prioritization, evaluation. This is the framework for the African. Let us sit together in the AU, in SADC, in COMESA to discuss this possibility and be clear about what we want done. Okay? We must have clear African ambitions that inform and determine the nature and content of the global partnerships. Do not just fit into the Chinese vision. Just fit into BR, which is the Belt and Road Initiative. React to the Belt and Road Initiative. Where is your own Belt and Road Initiative as an African? Before you talk about the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. That is the message today. Okay, and I won't go into the details of the ambitions, but I'll just list the ambitions. Ambition number 1, addressing our user needs. What are the problems that Africans want addressed? That's our first ambition. Harnessing the potential benefits of space science to addressing our economic challenges. And then you go to the details of that ambition. The quality of life must go up, the African capacity to manage the program, capacity to use the technologies, education on the programs, the tools, and so on. Okay? Ensure that we own the resources and we are able to deal with warning systems, extreme weather, climate, ecosystems, and so on and so forth. Okay? We go to ambition number 2, African access to space products and services. That's our ambition number 2, to strengthen the space mission on the continent and allow for optimal use of space-derived data, information, and services. Then you go into the details of that ambition. We want to avoid duplication. Nigeria is doing this, Algeria that, South Africa this. Why don't we coordinate and reduce unnecessary duplication? Allow technology transfer among ourselves, manage our IP rights. There's need for coordination on the continent. Okay? Use Pan-African institutions like the Pan-African University Space Institute and have centers of competence in Africa, centers of excellence, so that we avoid duplication and leverage our scale as Africans. Okay? We quickly go to number 3, developing the continental market for space science and technology. Okay? Again, we quickly go to ambition number 4, adopting good governance in the management of the African space program. The African must be organized. The African must have ambitions. The African must plan before they talk to China. Pan-African, inclusive bottom approach, independence of African space, funding. He who pays the piper calls the tune. Don't allow these donors, these do-gooders, to pay for our program. The African must pay for his space program. The African must pay for his economic development. Otherwise, if you don't pay for your development, someone will control your agenda. Even the Chinese, I mean, they are our friends, but they're business people. They're not Father Christmas, these ones. They are looking after their own interests. So the African must pay for his own economic development. The African must pay for the space program so that we can control the agenda. Africans must be the main funders of our program. That is a key agenda. We must educate the decision makers, the politicians, the public about the importance of space. Agenda number 5, coordination across the entire continent. To avoid duplication, we must share experiences. across the continent. Promoting intra-Africa space collaboration and international relationships. These international relationships must be mutually beneficial. They must be equitable. We must be able to influence international agreements. So as the African Union, as SADC, we must be able to engage as equals with China, engage with the US in the same manner. Ambition number 7 is the most important, and I've already spoken to it. The space program must be driven by an integrated and united Africa approach. No bilateral deals. We want to unlock economies of scale and increase impact of our program. No little deals between Algeria and China, Nigeria and China, South Africa and China. No, we don't want that. We're in the African Union to engage China so we can unlock scale, unleash better value from partnerships if we go as Africa. We must contextualize the program to our plans, the SADC industrialization strategy, the SADC infrastructure master plan, more importantly, the AU Agenda 2063. That is our Bible as Africans. So far, what we want is in Agenda 2063. All our national programs, regional programs must come from the AU Agenda 2063. We are now talking about regional competitiveness, regional attractiveness, continental competitiveness. South Africa won't be attractive if Botswana is not attractive. South Africa won't be attractive if there's chaos in Zimbabwe. The region must be competitive. The region must be attractive. The African continent must be successful, must be competitive. We must think continent. You must be able to say, I'm an African first, a citizen of SADC second, South African third. Can you say that? I'm an African first, a citizen of SADC second, a Malawian third. De-emphasize the nation and put Africa up front. The African is not ready. Let me show you why I'm castigating the nation state. Look at Zimbabwe. GDP, $12 billion. Population, 30 million people. Chicken change. Little South Africa, what are the numbers? 55 million people. GDP, $30 billion. Nothing. Meaningless. Little Botswana, what are your numbers? 2.3 million people. GDP, $16 billion. Can you negotiate with China with those bad numbers? No, you can't. You win. That's why we don't want it. He likes it. We don't. Look at the numbers that make sense. SADC. Now we're talking, my brother. 280 million people. GDP, $600 billion. Now we are talking. The tripartite free trade area, SADC, COMESA, and EAC. 630 million people. Potential GDP, 1.3 trillion. Now, that is attractive to China, to India, to America. Those numbers make sense. They get better. Look at your numbers, my brother, Dr. Ming. Look at your numbers. 1.3 billion Chinese. GDP, $11 trillion. That's why you're successful. You're pooling as one. Economies of scale. Look at India. 1.2 billion people. GDP, $2.5 trillion. That's why India is boiling out of control. Look at the Americans. 325 million people. GDP, $19 trillion. Those are economies. Not Mickey Mouse Zimbabwe, Mickey Mouse South Africa, and Mickey Mouse Botswana. Now look at that one now. Here's the African now talking. The African has arrived. The African Continental Free Trade Area. The African Union. What are the numbers? 1.3 billion people. GDP, $2.3 trillion. Seriously? Can you imagine if you had to rock up and say, here I come, I'm the African. I speak on behalf of 1.3 billion people. I have a GDP behind me of $2.3 trillion. The Americans will talk to you not out of love, out of economics. The Chinese will listen. The Chinese, not out of love, out of economics. Africans, wake up. Those are the numbers that matter. 1.3 billion Africans with a GDP of $2.3. That's how we can unlock synergies and build an African space program. Not as little South Africa, please. You are too small to be consequential. So keep your eyes on the prize. That's what we need to do. Africans, keep your eyes on the prize. That's what we need to do as Africans. And when you look at our space program, there are several pillars. We need a vision, the space program vision. We need a policy framework for our space program. We need a strategy, the game plan to take us to the promised land of our space program. We need African buy-in, continental African buy-in, Pan-African buy-in. We need continental integration to take place. And of course, we need global partnerships with our friends from China, our friends from Europe, our friends from America. Of course, we need to monitor and evaluate. We need feedback. As you can see, the partnerships are just one element out of 6. We can't have effective global partnerships without continental integration, without a vision, without a policy framework, without a strategy, without Pan-African buy-in. We got to have the 3 pillars to achieve our strategy, our space program. But we can learn from China because they were poor like us once upon a time. They were not in space before, now they're in space. We can be in space just like them, but on our terms. I thank you so very much.
Wow. Wow. Please join me with another round of applause, please.